kindergarten. Hey, we've been busy learning about different things on the earth. We've learned about living things and non-living things. We've learned about plants and animals and people and what they need to survive. And also people have things they want. They don't need them, but they want them, right? We know about those for sure. Well, now we're going to start learning about different places and the people and animals that live there. So today we're going to start at the top and the bottom of the world. So I have our world here. Let's see if we remember, where do we live? What continent? 7 continents. Which one is ours? North America. That's ours. And here's the United States, all 50 states here. I can zoom right in, and there's Colorado right there. Well, if I were to get on an airplane and go up to the top of the earth or the world, this is called the Arctic. And in the Arctic is the Arctic Ocean. So all up here is one big ocean, but a lot of the most of the year it's frozen over because it's so cold up here. So around the ocean is a bunch of land, and there are people that live in the Arctic up here around the land. So that's the Arctic. The sun, when the sun is shining on the earth, it doesn't hit the top. It kind of hits around that middle. Remember we talked about the equator? That's where it's the hottest and warmest. And so the top doesn't get a lot of direct sunlight, so it stays cold most of the year. Also, the bottom of the earth, the South Pole, so we have the North Pole and the South Pole. The South Pole down here has another of our 7 continents, Antarctica. Brr. That surrounds the whole South Pole. It's one big continent, and it's frozen also. There's land underneath, but it has miles of layers of thick ice and snow on it. And then around that is the Antarctic Ocean, also known as the Southern Ocean. So we're going to kind of talk about the cold parts, the polar places in the world at the North and South Pole. So I've got a book about that today, and it's called Poles Apart. It's got some polar bears and some penguins in it. If you ever see polar bears and penguins together in a movie, you know it's fiction. And it's not true, because polar bears and penguins do not live together. They live on opposite ends of the earth. So let's learn a little bit about these polar places, okay? So here's the North Pole at the top, South Pole down below. Polar bears and penguins don't live together. In the wild, they would never even meet. Polar bears live in the Arctic at the top of the world, while most penguins live near the Antarctic at the bottom of the world. The Antarctic and Arctic are similar places at opposite ends of the earth. They are both very cold with lots of snow and ice. Winters are dark, and in summer the sun shines 24 hours a day. Back at the North Pole, the Arctic is an ocean surrounded by land. We talked about that. If you stand at the North Pole at the very top of the earth, you would be on a frozen sea ice over a deep ocean. The seafloor would be 2.5 miles below you. Antarctica is land about the same size as North America. And it's surrounded by sea. It's covered by a big layer of ice known as the ice cap. There's some penguins down there. If you stand at the South Pole at the bottom of the earth, you would have to dig through almost 2 miles of ice before you reach solid rock. So both parts of the world have miles of solid ice. So at the North Pole, there's many plants that live in the Arctic. They need to be small, tough plants that can survive being squashed under heavy snow each winter. In summer, the ice melts and the plants bloom. These plants form a region known as the tundra. The snow hare is one of the many animals that feed on the plants of the tundra. You'll notice there's not any big trees there. Also, if we look in the Antarctic, it's so cold and dry in Antarctica that very few plants can survive here. There's not one single tree in all of Antarctica. Do you remember what plants and trees need to survive? Remember the parts of a plant? Those roots go down deep in the ground to help the plant or the tree grow. Well, in Antarctica and in the Arctic, it gets cold so much those roots can't go down in that cold frozen land, so we can't have big trees there like we have in Colorado. There's not one single tree here, and the nearest one is over 600 miles away. The only plants that can survive here in the Antarctic are moss and lichen. And only, if you notice, you've probably seen moss growing on rocks before when it kind of gets slimy when it's wet. So moss is about the only thing growing in the Antarctic. No trees. There are some bushes and plants in the Arctic, though. Then it talks a bit about some of the insects you would see. These are puffins. They kind of look like penguins, but they are not. They're a special kind of bird. And penguins can't fly, but puffins can. So they live in the Arctic, and actually they fly from the Arctic to the Antarctic. They're one of the only animals that can move between both places. So does one of our whales. All right, penguins are only found on the bottom half of the world. Their little wings are useless for flying. That means they can't use them to fly, but they are excellent for steering when they swim. So they are excellent swimmers. The top predators of the Arctic are the polar bears. When hunting over the ice, a polar bear will sometimes hide its black nose with its paw so it can blend into the snow. So it covers its nose so it can be camouflaged. This makes it easier for the large creature to creep up on sleeping seals. A polar bear is a great swimmer and will eat everything from roots and berries to hares and seals. And remember, hares are a type of rabbit. So I know we love seals. They look so cute and fluffy. But you know, polar bears have to survive too, and they eat seals. So we have to be open-minded and say, okay, that's all right for polar bears to do. One of the top predators of the Antarctic is the leopard seal. It hunts like a crocodile, cruising around in the water with only his eyes and nostrils sticking out of the water as he looks for penguins to eat. He's got really sharp teeth too, almost like a shark. If the polar bear was ever to get near the leopard seal, which they wouldn't because they live on opposite ends of the earth though, I wonder if the polar bear would be able to eat this guy. He's pretty dangerous. I don't know. That'd be quite a battle, wouldn't it? Good thing they don't live together in the same parts. The Arctic landscape changes from plants and tundra in the summer to a frozen world of snow and ice in winter. Hunters like the snowy owl and the Arctic fox turn white in the winter to blend in with the snow. So these guys are usually brown in the summer and springtime, but then they turn white to be camouflaged so so other animals won't find them and eat them. In the Antarctic, it's cold enough for snow and ice all year round. So white is a good color camouflage. Many birds like this giant petrel, they stay white all year in the Antarctic. Up here in the Arctic, here's a bunch of walruses. Look at those big old tusks. And in the Antarctic, these are called elephant seals. And they cuddle together to stay warm. The pups are the little baby elephant seals, and they cannot go in the water until they get bigger because they have to be able to swim fast to stay away from predators like the killer whale or that leopard seal we saw. They would want to eat them. At the North Pole, we see some bearded seals. This is they have rubbery noses that can blow up to look like red balloons. Oh, look at his nose. And they do this to attract a mate. So if they want to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend, they blow up their nose to look pretty. Like humans, seals are air breathers. These are Weddell seals, and they dive under in the Antarctic for fish and octopus to eat. But they have to come up in these air holes ever so often to breathe. Back to the North Pole, these are narwhals. Have you ever seen a narwhal on TV? They have these giant tusks that they look like big swords. So these whales only have 2 teeth, and one of their teeth is 6 feet long. Now that's longer than me. So can you imagine how tall that would be? It's taller than I am. And then the males, they fight with those tusks. Yep. There's some whales down in the South Pole. The North Pole also has musk oxen. Look how thick their fur is to survive there. And here's Antarctica. Emperor penguins have some of the toughest winters. They spend months in the freezing dark shuffling around, and the daddies, the males, are the ones that have the little egg on top of their feet to protect it. The males won't eat for about 100 days while they wait for their female mates to return in the spring with food for the new chicks. So the mamas, they lay the eggs, and then daddies roll them on their feet and cover it with this little warm fur, like a warm furry blanket. And for 100 days, they keep them warm there while mom goes looking for food for those chicks. Because if the eggs were to land on the ground, they would freeze, and those poor little chicks wouldn't hatch. So those daddies have an important job. Back to the North Pole, we see caribou and foxes, red foxes. Here's some more whales in the Antarctic. People have lived in the Arctic for more than 5,000 years. The Inuit live in the Arctic. They used to call them Eskimos, but the proper term is Inuit. And here is an igloo. I'm sure you've seen igloos before. They used to live in them, but nowadays they don't live in them, but they use them when they go out hunting. They might make an igloo to stay in while they're hunting, but they have regular houses now in the Arctic that they can live in. There's also people known as the Sami, and they help herd all the reindeer or the caribou. And we'll see those in a book we're going to read. There's no land connecting Antarctica to other countries. So this frozen continent was only discovered about 200 years ago. Today, the only people who live here are scientists who are doing research about wildlife and weather and global warming. So they don't have permanent houses in Antarctica. They just go there to research things. Scientists go there. So they don't have grocery stores. There's no King Soopers, no Target, nothing there. This starts to talk about things we need to do to save the earth from getting too warm, so that we don't harm our animals. So that gives us some information about North Pole and South Pole and the animals that live there, the plants we see there, and some of the humans that live there too. All right, we will be learning more. Bye, guys.